Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Macro Podcast. Joining me today is my good friend Derek Clifford. And Derek, welcome to the show. And guys, the reason why I invited Derek is a lot of people talk about the dream of remote life, and Derek has actually done it. So I was hoping to bring Derek on to talk about that. Derek, can you first of all tell us a little bit before the before time of real estate, before you migrated into this space? How how did you get started in your career before real estate?
Yeah, well, first of all, Doug, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to add value to anyone who's willing to listen. So, yeah, how I got started in real estate, I was a W-2 worker for many, many years, and I had this one conversation back in my engineering job. So, just to give a little bit more background, I'm an engineer, a chemical engineer by training. Eventually went to go get my MBA to climb the corporate ladder. And
Mm,
I thought that my way of escaping the whole corporate structure was to do the Dave Ramsey method and save
mm,
up enough so that I could live off of 4% of a nest egg, right? That's what the average dividend yielding stock returns based on the compounding of 8% every year. That was my approach from Dave Ramsey. I found out that it was going to take me about 20 years to do that. And once I understood that there was another way by reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, that real estate was one method in which people can generate wealth quickly and passively and in a tax advantaged way, I had to give it a thought and really explore it. So, what triggered all this was I had a conversation with my one of my bosses at the time, and I was working in a refinery in Washington State, and when I was out there, the calculations and the things that led me to suggest some of the recommendations I had for the client that I was working for as an engineering contractor helped save the company millions of dollars in energy savings, also in production gains,
mm.
and just sizing equipment correctly, and basically, adjusting the system so that it had some flexibility to be able to handle more operations on the lower end and on the higher end of these different streams coming into the process. So, long story short, I brought these savings to my supervisor and I said, look, I'm saving this company millions of dollars. I'd like a bonus, right, for that because I've done all this. And basically, they kind of laughed at me and they told me that this is just part of your job. And I'm like, that part just, it crushed me because I was like, I thought I was working super hard to provide a ton of value. And the company that I'm working for should be able to compensate me or give me some proportion, even if it's a small
Mm.
fraction of what I was saving for the client, that I wanted to have some of that. And I realized that in there that W-2 was just not right for me because the energy that I put in did not necessarily translate to a benefit to me directly. So I had to find a way to get some ownership in some businesses. And then that led me down the path of needing to find a side hustle, starting to buy properties out of state, single family homes, and then eventually running out of loans because you can only get 10 single family
Yep.
loans when you're starting out. And then scaling into multifamily and then running out of my own money in multifamily and then doing syndications and
And
so
Derek,
on and so
I hate
forth.
to interrupt, but I'm like fascinated by this whole moment because it feels like it's like an epiphany when you find out, like, oh, this is a terrible analogy maybe, but you feel you thought you had the love of your life and you find out they don't really love you or something almost.
Bingo.
It's
That's
like,
exactly right.
good
Oh my
lord, I
God.
just did this and you didn't. I mean, where's the love, man? And
That's totally
that's
right.
fantastic because it's like it's just like an awareness. It's like this isn't ever going to be different than this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just felt really crushed and defeated. And luckily, everything good in my life has come from my wife in a way.
Mm.
And so my wife, she helped point the direction. She's into personal development and everything. And, when I was feeling down about that, she helped show me that there was another way to think about all this. And we explored it together and started to go down this path while working a W-2 on the side, right, as a side hustle.
And so you took that mindset shift and then delved into, it sounds like, a lot of different avenues of like single family stuff, and you got your feet wet there.
Yes, it started out with buying single family homes.
Mm.
We started trying to do something in California locally where we were living at the time. But then we realized that like it was going to take us forever to get a whole bunch of single families in California. So we started buying properties out in the Midwest from our home base in California. And man, it makes a huge difference when you're buying a house that's like a $500,000 house and it rents for $3,000 a month. Whereas if you buy in the Midwest, something for $50,000 that rents for $600 a month, the ratios just make so much more sense out there in the Midwest back when we were buying.
Yeah.
And what was crazy is that I had my unfair advantage, which is what Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets, or he used to be on it, always said you should do. And I remember saying my unfair advantage is my paycheck in the California Bay Area. So I'll take that paycheck, and literally, Doug, like one paycheck was one down payment for a house in Indianapolis at the time.
Right.
That
Right.
was huge for me. So I just took and leaned into that with full force. And that's what happened.
And it seems like that's definitely a thing in real estate. California money in the Midwest, and take the money, not the real estate in California. It's like if you're in real estate in California, you're somehow a capital provider. It
That's
really, at the
right.
end of the day, it's fascinating. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah, it's really, really a popular approach. And especially back then, when I was doing this, like the numbers made a lot of sense, and the numbers are shifting now. It still makes sense to buy the Midwest. I just love it out there because the cash flow for the amount of purchase price, or I'm sorry, the amount of cash flow you're getting for the purchase price, that ratio is just super, super favorable for people. And while cash flow isn't necessarily everything, appreciation really helps. But if you have cash flow, you're able to hold that property for appreciation for as long as you need. And so
And
people kind of miss that.
I'm fascinated. What about multifamily caught your eye, or when did you, or like, oh, wait a minute, multifamily?
Yeah, when I heard someone say that the amount of effort that it takes for you to close on 14 units is the same as 100 units or 140 units, I just thought to myself, how is that even possible?
Mm-hmm.
It always seemed like it was this really like far-fetched, intangible goal that like I always wanted to get there. And so I stuck in my single family world for quite some time. But once I understood that there really wasn't much to it except learning some of the vocabulary, understanding who I needed to talk to, who I need to build relationships with. Once I got that down, that was where I needed to go. I also ran out of loans, Doug, too. That's
Oh yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah,
quite the
for sure.
simple thing. I had 10 loans. I ran
Yep.
out of the 10 loans,
It's
and then I didn't have any other thing. I could refinance into a commercial loan, but I figured I might as well. I have my portfolio building equity for me. While I figure this thing out, let's start switching to multifamily while I have those single families working. So that was my thought at the time.
That's an incredible arc too, because and that's definitely another thing. Definitely, that's like a law of physics. It's like much like California money is like, if you're in real estate, it's probably a capital provider. Another law of real estate physics is that you hit 10 loans in single family, then it starts to, that's just a wall that you hit. And so then commercial starts to make a lot of sense for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, it sure does. It sure does. So that was that. And then eventually I started running out of money.
Mm.
And when you run out of money, now it's like, okay, now what do I do? And then I came across syndication. And the way that, again, my wife was the one who introduced me to this concept. And again, like the same pattern of fear and saying, oh my gosh, like this is something new. I don't think I can do something like this. It's really intimidating, accepting other people's money and then deploying it. But eventually I got around to that idea and got comfortable with it with mentors and with coaching and consistency and clarity. And once I had all of those things in place, then it was just a natural fit. And then it was just a matter of time, Doug, before then I was able to fully escape the W-2.
And so you, what was your first multifamily deal? I assume in the Midwest also.
It was also in Indianapolis, and it was probably the worst deal that I've ever done in a way, right? Like
Yeah.
it was the hardest one. But like I learned so much from it, right? I cut my teeth on this one and I did everything wrong that you could do on this property, but at least I did it with my own money, right? In it. And so that's one of the things I recommend to people starting out.
And um, when you started scaling your multifamily portfolio, when did it start to like, oh, wait a minute, this whole idea of being completely location independent, when did that start to like, oh, aha?
Yeah.
When did that epiphany? Was that always a goal before, like when you started your single family portfolio, or was it like, or like later on when you're like, man, you know what? This looks like this could be a remote business for us.
Yeah, great question. I've never been asked that question before as to when that approach came in. But I would say that from the beginning, I always knew that as long as I could afford to pay a property manager,
Hmm.
this is the age of the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like you can take care of stuff as long as you have a good team or boots on the ground there. So the location independence thing was always something that I wanted as a part of this passive income generation machine, right?
Mm.
Like I wanted the money to come in, I needed it to hit my bank account, but it hits my bank account no matter where I am in the world.
Hmm.
So I was really drawn towards that from the beginning. But what I'll tell you though, Doug, is when we fully embraced all of this, we were able to achieve the 3 degrees of freedom in a specific order. The first degree of freedom that we like to call is location freedom, right? You're able to basically be anywhere. And people who work a W 2 job can have this. If you work through the internet, you can work from anywhere, right? As long as your employer allows you to do that.
Hmm.
That was the first step that we achieved, especially during COVID. And once our passive income from our investments reached a certain threshold. Okay. The cool thing about that, though, Doug, is that at the time when I was working, and this is the middle of COVID, right when COVID hit, we became locationally independent. We could go anywhere we wanted to because we were all doing remote work from home. And what ended up happening was uh, we, as we became mobile, we started to realize that there are places out in the country where you can live for a lot less than you can in the Bay Area. So we had a passive income machine that was generating about $5,000 to $6,000 a month, and our goal was to get to 10 or 12 because that's about how much it takes for you to live in the California Bay Area.
Hmm.
So what happened was when we left the California Bay Area, we sold our house, right? We sold everything. So all we have now is a car and 6 pieces of luggage that we're just driving around in,
Yeah.
right? It's Airbnb to Airbnb.
Hmm.
It turns out you can do a lot of living around the country for $5,000, $6,000 a month. And that's exactly what happened. So as we became locationally independent, that gave us financial freedom. And soon after that, we became time free because I eventually left the full time job and got myself into a situation where I could have a reservoir of capital to use as an investment vehicle in both myself and in apartment buildings across the country. So as long as we built something where our investments had a boots on the ground partner in all of these different markets, and we were doing our job as well as we can through the internet and raising capital, doing asset management, doing acquisitions, and talking with brokers and meeting with people wherever we travel to, we felt that we had achieved the 3 degrees of freedom by escaping the W 2 and allowing ourselves to have personal expenses that are lower than it was back in the Bay Area when we started. So
And
that's kind of how it happened.
when you fully captured that moment, what was it like when you realized, oh, we've done it?
Yeah, geez, I think it happened in stages,
Mm.
and it wasn't until it already happened that we had a chance to sit back and say, "Oh my gosh, we've achieved what we were looking to
Well,
achieve."
yeah.
We thought it was going to take us 10 years to get to where we were going to go, and it was way shorter than that. And it just like kind of the realization of, oh my gosh, like this is it here. And then bigger questions started coming up with like, okay, what's next now? Like what are we doing now with ourselves? What does the vision look like now going forward? We've gone through the 1.0 version of us, which was what it was like working a W 2 with, I hate to say this, no hope, basically,
Yeah.
just following my parents' path, and bless my parents because they did the best that they could. And
Yeah.
they had a great model that worked back then. But I was anticipating fully to work until age 60, right? And then retire. Then the 2.0 version of us was, oh my gosh, there's this financial freedom thing. Let's
Mm.
try to get there. And now we've achieved that. Now, what is the 3.0 version, right? Like now that we have this financial freedom, what are we working to do next in this 3.0 iteration between my wife and I?
I'm gonna be controversial, spicy, and this might cause some trouble for some friends of mine.
Okay.
Some friends of mine adore Dave Ramsey, and for good reason. I do not categorically. I must say that I respect Dave Ramsey. Having said that, can you achieve what you've achieved via a Dave Ramsey mindset?
You are going to cause some controversy
I
here.
am. I'm gonna go there.
I unfortunately have to tell people that the answer to that question is probably. but most likely no. Unless you have a really big shovel. If you're making $2 million a year, right, with your income, then yes, of course that will work. But the odds are, if you're making that much money per year, you're connected in a network where you have investment opportunities that most likely will steer you away from that traditional advice.
Mm.
So the advice that I have for people is that if you can get to a point where you use Dave Ramsey's method to get yourself out of debt and get control of your expenses, learn that lesson. Let the Dave Ramsey approach be a tool in your tool belt, not the entire tool belt.
Wow.
It can't be the whole strategy. It has to be a technique that you use whenever you need it, right? But you need to be able to evolve past it. So I encourage people to start learning and educating themselves past that model once you've achieved debt freedom, or gotten to a point where you understand your finances and you know where you're going.
I have to say that may be the single best answer I've ever heard to this question.
Thank you.
I have to say that reminded me of Bruce Lee. He said, "Be water, my friends." And what Jeet Kune Do was about is about integrating all methods. Like, okay, well, we're going to use a fencing stance, and we're going to use boxing, U.S. boxing style, and of course, a bunch of Wing Chun Gung Fu. So really, what you've answered there, and it was an incredible way to look at it, is okay. The answer is not necessarily yes or no. It's what tool for what objective, and I really admire that answer, because what it's saying is it'll take you far, but how far will it take you? And then so let's start with them Dave Ramsey, and then start thinking Rich Dad Poor Dad after that, after a while. That's
100%.
incredible.
I think it's very important for people to understand that things change over time. People grow, right? Directions move and targets move, right? And I think that while there's a place for a tool, every time you hear something and anything you learn, you have to remember that nothing is permanent ever. And you gotta be aware of the fact that like there's a tool for every job. And as you start growing, you outgrow tools. You don't need that tricycle anymore. You can ride on a bike, right? Or you can drive a car. So those are some of the things like that you just have to be aware of, that life evolves and changes, and you have to embrace that change. And the people that I have seen that have been the most successful in business are the people that embrace that change well, right? They understand that change is there, and they're willing to step up to the plate to learn new skills and know that curiosity will pay off in lots of different ways, right? So the most successful people I know are curious. They're always looking to change or evolve, and they're asking questions, and they're very inquisitive and trying to understand how things work. So as long as you understand that, so if you're at the beginning of your journey and Dave Ramsey is right for you, awesome. Please use that. Use it, but know that eventually, once you get to a point where you're debt free, now what? Yes, you can continue to build up your money debt, and be debt free. And that's going to be an excellent way to move. But I would say that it's kind of foolish, because you're losing out on potential returns in the future if you trust yourself and trust the people that you know well, and make calculated, well thought out risks. That's what you need to do.
And it really is an awareness of good debt versus bad debt, and
Yeah.
and again the discipline that it takes to responsibly use debt. And it's interesting to me is that even if you uh, embrace that lesson, just knowing, okay, look, it's great, but at some point, smart debt is really, I mean, think about the leverage you get. I mean, it's the power of leverage in real estate. It's both a power and a trap, unfortunately. And I will say, in real estate, we're about to see, I believe, a little bit of the downside, and not by fault of any. I mean, lots of syndicators that no fault of their own, with some bridge debt, might be in a little bit of trouble right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I think that unfortunately that's the caveat to this. But having said that, overall, in the bigger picture of the 10-year or the 20-year view, you're going to need to use debt to get there, if you really want to have a massive change in your outcome. And again, I don't know about you, but I came from a blue collar background. My dad was a truck driver, and my mom cut hair when she worked. So the only chance I have at any sort of wealth at all, I better learn how to use leverage.
I would totally agree there. I think that as you learn how to use leverage, that's going to teach you the skills that it's going to take in order to succeed at this game, right? And how to amplify your returns. Because it is scary, but you got to take those risks, because if you can measure your risks the right way, if you use a Dave Ramsey method to get yourself out of debt, right? And you start saving up enough so that you can invest, if you're smart about it, you can get to a place where you don't expose yourself to more risk than you need to. So, I'm not asking people that once they achieve debt freedom for them to go out and take extraneous risks. That doesn't make any sense either.
Right.
Most people should be taking appropriate risks for where they are. And a lot of people don't realize they can do a lot of investing right now with what they have, with the resources they have right now. And the sooner you do that, the sooner you learn how to apply those resources, the sooner you can start to compound that in ways you never thought possible. So it's all about that first one.
To that point, let's say they wanted to invest with a experienced syndicator as an LP and transition that way. What are your thoughts on that method in learning the process?
Yeah. So again, I hate to say that it depends, but that's really the classic business answer that it comes down to. That's what they told us in business school, is that the answer is always it
Yes.
depends.
Right.
But I think that if you are going to be in this business full time, if you love real estate investing, I think it's actually worthwhile for you to build an active business, which means you're going to take the time to learn how to do either buy and hold house flips, right? Like do your own house or buy and holds, or do burrs or whatever. Do that in a way so that you can start to build a network up of people that can help support you in that business, so you can leverage when you start getting more active later on. If you know that real estate seems great, like you love all the features, but you don't have the time for it, you just want to do your job and you like what you do, or you don't hate it, then I think passive investing is great, because you're partnering up with other people who are paid to do that. And you both are in a deal together where what's good for them is good for you also. Finding those places where incentives line up on the passive side is great. So it just depends on whether that your risk tolerance is very high and you like to get your hands dirty and you don't mind taking on some extra work, you have some bandwidth for that, and you really like passive or really like real estate investing, then I think that the active side is appropriate for you, and you should explore that route. Otherwise, I think passive investing is likely to be the best situation for most investors out there who are looking for all the features of real estate but don't want to go through the hassle of learning everything and spending the time and energy to deal with property managers, brokers, insurance people, lenders, those types of things. So
Absolutely.
hopefully that's helpful for you and your audience.
And let's say they are coming into the game and they're uh, really decided. They've said, "Hey, I'm definitely going to go GP."
Yeah.
What are your tips for choosing coaches, mentor programs? Because there's a ton out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some are great.
Mm-hmm.
Some are terrible.
Yes.
Ask me how I know.
Right.
So do you have any good tips for how do you get at that problem of what you should and shouldn't do in coaching programs and whatnot?
Yeah, I hope it's okay. I take this opportunity to back up a little bit with this, because coaching, I think, is a necessary part of everyone's journey in becoming a GP if you want to become a GP.
Mhm.
However, the best way to get started in any business, including a single family portfolio of homes, which is also, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to be in the active side, or if you want to be an active syndicator or a capital raiser or so on and so forth, um, is to follow the 4 C's.
Hmm.
The 4 C's is consistency, clarity, coaching, and connections.
Mhm.
And what I tell people, I mean, it's pretty clear what all of these are, but I'm just going to go through them just real quick.
Sure.
Consistency is being able to set aside a single, like a block of time every single day for you to be able to do what you want to do to get closer to your goal, right?
Mhm.
So if you set aside 1 hour every morning for the purposes of getting better at real estate, whether you're looking for deals or you're educating yourself or whatever, doing that consistency piece is 1 C. The next C is clarity. If you know exactly what you're looking for because you see other people getting it, or you have this very clear vision, that's going to propel you to success. The third C is connections. If you have connections who you're surrounded around that are already doing this thing, you're going to be drawn into peer pressure on a subconscious way to want to fit into that group, and you're going to have to just get there. And then there's the coaching, right? The coaching piece is also important because it helps you go past, like leapfrog past mistakes that you could make. You're not dwelling on things that aren't important, and you're just getting a general accountability and clarity on what you need to go forward. So of those 4 C's, I would highly recommend that people pick one of those C's that you most resonate with. For me, it was consistency. And what ends up happening is I showed up, at 7 a.m. every morning while I was working a W-2 for an hour. Sometimes I didn't even know what I was going to work on for that hour. It didn't matter. Showed up at 7 a.m. before all the traffic rolled in, and before at 8, where everything started at work. I was there. I was learning about what to do, putting a Rolodex together when I was flying out to Indy next. I was doing anything I could in that 1 hour to stay focused on my business. And what ended up happening is I realized I needed clarity, I needed connections, and I needed coaching, is what happened. And if you lean into any one of those other C's, right? If you are more of a network person, you like to talk with people, when you do that, you're going to find that your people are going to recommend that you get clear. They're going to recommend that you get consistent, and they're going to recommend you get a mentor, right? And the same thing, if you get a mentor, right, they're going to recommend you get into a network or provide a network to you. They're going to recommend that you have a call to action, a very consistent call to be able to do something, right, over time. So you see how they're all connected. And so while I think that a coach is really important, and I think that there are some tips I would have for finding a coach, I think that it's part of an ecosystem, right? Where if you're consistent or you're clear or you have connections, that will help inform what type of coach you're looking for and what your gaps are. So that being said, when you're looking for a coach, I would first pick the person that you would want your life to be like. So if you see a coaching a program out there, and you get the idea that that the way that they conduct themselves is the way that you would want to talk with them on a personal level, that's a good sign. The other tip I would have is loop in your spouse. My spouse has got a very great, like, I would say, like a radar for whether or not people are genuine. And so that's a really, really big thing. Number 3 is tap your connections, right? Like, ask people, who are you using, or who did you use? And then I think the 4th thing is just follow your gut, right? Like, start looking at the material and see if it really resonates with you. And understand that cost, while that's an important piece of it, the cost is designed to help get you motivated.
Yeah.
Because if you go into a course and it's free, I mean, you don't have any skin in the game, right? Like, you didn't pay anything for it, so what's the point? But if you spent 30 grand, you better believe that you're showing up to every single one of those calls for the year that you have it, because each one of those coaching calls that you get has cost you $1,000, and you have to make advantage.
And it's my show, so I can explicitly do this. I do know a few of them. One I will say that I believe is expensive, but probably worth every single penny. Joe Fairless is up to 70 grand right now, and that's a lot of money.
Wow.
I will say this, though. I believe it would be worth every penny, because in the end, what he does, and he's idiosyncratic almost to me. I don't know that there's many I would say, yes, definitely I would spend that kind of money with. But having known Joe, in fact, I met Joe back on Bigger Pockets right before. I think he had one deal when I met Joe. And to see what he's accomplished has been so fun to see what he's done. But I know from personal experience and people that have been in his coaching, worth every dime of it. So
I would say that's a very good indication too. If these coaches are hiking up their prices because they're just trying to weed people out, then if you're one of those people that are very serious about it, then that's what you got to do, right? So
whatever it takes.
Yeah, but again, I think there's more to it than just the coaching.
I want to say also, this is the second time on this podcast you've said it, maybe one of the single best answers I've ever heard. The answer about the 4 C's and how the interconnectedness of that decision is brilliant insight, because it is true. It's not a isolated thing. It is a system of has anyone told you, Derek, you might be a good engineer? I don't know if anybody's mentioned that or anything, but
yeah, no, I think
you have a thing for systems. It's interesting.
Yeah, no, I love systems. I love thinking about like what what things truly are. And if you've read Ray Dalio's Principles, one of the quotes that I love that he says is, always seek to find out what's true, not seek to be correct or seek to feel
Oof.
correct.
Yep.
And while it's easy for me to come up here and say, this is what worked for me, right?
Mhm.
I think that it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So I like to try to take a step back and make sure that what I'm saying fits for everyone, right? And there's at least something that anyone can take away something from, even if it doesn't resonate with you. So
Well,
yeah.
and I love that too. It's the trying to make a principle universal, and so instead of being an idiosyncratic principle that work in this particular case, if we can derive the okay, let's take away all the variables and let's say, can we isolate this variable and say, well, I think that variable is true no matter where you put it.
This is
Very good
this
stuff.
is right up my alley, man. It feels
Right.
like yeah, this is good stuff.
Oh, this is where we always go. It might start off easy peasy on this podcast, but if I can take it into some geeky econometrics, I will. Principal
Let's do it.
component analysis might be my weird hobby.
I
So
love it.
yeah, this is exactly what we do on this podcast is try to get to the geekiest thing we can find. So,
Well,
but and I
you
think
have a
we got there.
success.
We got
Yeah,
there.
you've got the success because I'm on the show, so
Yeah,
it's perfect.
that's absolutely. I was like, how did we get here? I had no idea that I'd get to principal component analysis before we started, but alas, we've done it.
I love it. It's perfect.
Awesome. Derek, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story of getting to the literally the dream that a lot of people would love to do, I myself included, the idea of location, time, and everything independence. And you've literally done it, and I love that you're able to actually communicate in a very cogent way of like, guys, if you want to do it, this is likely the thread that you have to think about. And thank you for continuing to share that message, because I think it's a popular objective. I just don't think there's a lot of clarity, and I know a lot of people like the idea but don't quite get there. And I love that you've
Yep.
done it, and you're being so very generous to share how you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone wants to find out more about how we did this, please go to elevateequity.org/podcast gift. It's for all the people that have listened to us on podcasts. We really appreciate you. It basically tells you, the things that we focused on to get to where we are right now, the equities that we built in our relationship, in our finances, in our knowledge, to help build us to get to where we are today, including a checklist of things where you are currently and what you need to work on in order to get there. And so I wanted to thank you also for breaking it down and being a great host and asking wonderful questions, things I've never heard before. I think that people will take away tons of value from here, and just really appreciate you as
That
well.
is an incredible compliment. I hope I'm being useful in this podcast. And again, I hate to say it, but in a way, I'm just selfish and getting so much value from people like you, Derek, that are coming on and sharing like this incredible background. I literally, and this is, we're recording this on Thanksgiving Eve, and I literally there is tremendous gratitude from my standpoint of I'm just surrounded by incredible people, yourself included, Derek. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Thank you.